I'm not trying to impress anyone anymore. At this age, I just want to feel like I'm still a man. That's how he started. No pretense, no small talk. Just that one line, and I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't joking. He wasn't even embarrassed. He was searching. Like many men do, quietly, after 60. I met him at a rural clinic in Davao, a place where the air smelled of salt and old rain. He was 67, retired from the postal service, and had 3 grandchildren who adored him. But he'd come alone that day, walking slowly with a stiffness in his hips that didn't match his sturdy build. He sat down across from me, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Doc, I don't sleep anymore. I get up 3, sometimes 4 times to pee. But that's not why I came." I asked him why he had come. He paused, cleared his throat, and said something most men his age rarely admit, even to themselves. "I don't feel like a man anymore. Not really. Down there, things aren't the same." And I was wondering, should I still be doing it? You know, touching myself? He said it with a quiet shame, the kind that comes from years of silence. But under the shame, there was also something else. Hope. A fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone. That maybe this wasn't the beginning of the end. Let me tell you something I've learned after listening to thousands of men like him. There are certain questions men carry in silence, like heavy stones in their pockets. Questions they never ask. Not their wives, not their sons, not even their doctors. And one of the heaviest stones is this. Is it still okay to masturbate when you're older? For some, it's about guilt. For others, it's about confusion. But for many, it's about fear. Fear that what once made them feel alive now makes them feel ashamed or weak or unnatural. Because let's face it, no one prepares you for this stage of manhood. There's no roadmap, and the conversation around male sexuality in older age is either a joke or a secret. But what if I told you this question, simple as it seems, is actually a gateway to a much deeper truth? A truth not just about physical health, but emotional survival. A truth every man over 60 deserves to hear. Because what's really at stake here isn't just about pleasure. It's about dignity, identity, even peace. I'll never forget another man I met. Tony, 64, once a Navy diver with shoulders like iron and a voice like gravel. He told me that after retirement, he started feeling invisible. He missed the days when his body responded quickly, when he felt that rush, that power, that raw, masculine confidence. Now, he said, his hands felt foreign on his own skin. "I don't know if I'm doing something wrong," he confessed, "but it's the only time I still feel like I have control." Tony isn't alone. In fact, he represents millions of men across the world, men whose bodies have changed, whose hormones have shifted, but whose desires haven't simply disappeared. They just stopped talking about them. So, let's talk. Not with judgment, not with outdated myths, but with clarity, with compassion, and with medical truth. Because here's the reality. Masturbation doesn't expire with age, but how it affects the body and mind, that does change. And understanding that difference can be the line between living with shame and living with freedom. Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. When was the last time someone talked to you openly about your sexual health, your needs, your right to feel like a man, without laughing, without changing the subject, without making it feel dirty? If your answer is never, then maybe today is the first time, and that matters. You matter. There's something I need you to hear, especially if you're over 60, 65, 70. You're still a man. You still deserve to feel alive in your own body. What's happening to you isn't failure. It's biology. It's aging. But it's not the end. And masturbation? It can be a part of healthy aging, if it's understood properly. If it's done with intention, not confusion. If it's respected, not hidden. Because here's the secret most men don't know. The issue isn't your age. It's a simple habit most older men keep doing, without realizing it might be the reason they're feeling worse, not better. Yes, you heard that right. There's one mistake I see over and over again. Good men, Intelligent men falling into a trap that drains their energy, affects their sleep, and sometimes even leads to anxiety or prostate trouble. But it's not the act itself. It's how and when it's done, and why. That's what this video is about. Not judgment, not lectures, just truth. Scientific truth. Backed by urologists. Spoken plainly, for men who've lived enough life to deserve straight answers. Because here's what I believe. The real power in aging comes from understanding yourself, not just your past, but your present. And there's nothing more dignified, more courageous, than a man who decides to ask the questions no one else dares to ask. So, if that's you, if you've ever looked in the mirror and wondered whether you're still allowed to feel pleasure, whether it's still healthy, still normal, still yours, then stay with me. Because in a moment, we're going to break this down. We'll look at what really happens to the male body after 60. We'll uncover how the prostate changes, how testosterone shifts, how arousal works differently, and how, despite all that, there is a way to reclaim confidence, peace, and yes, even joy. But first, before we dive into biology, into science, into what most doctors never explain clearly, I want to ask you to remember this. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're not done. You're simply aging, and with the right understanding, that can be a beautiful thing. Now, before I tell you what changed everything for Tony, before I reveal the simple 6-word sentence his doctor said that stopped him in his tracks, let's take a moment to understand something deeper. What exactly happens to a man's body? When desire meets age, that's where we'll begin in the next part of this story. Tony had always been a man of routines. Early mornings, cold showers, strong coffee, and long walks with his Labrador named Max. Even after retirement, his discipline stayed intact. But about a year ago, something began to change. He started noticing the interruptions. At first, it was just once a night, getting up to urinate. Then, it became 2. Then, 3. Soon, sleep was no longer restful. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, not because he was in pain, but because he felt unfinished, like something inside him wasn't working the way it used to. He told me that what truly worried him wasn't the frequency. It was the sensation, like his bladder was never really empty, even after a trip to the bathroom. And worse, that sensation was beginning to creep into other parts of his life. I couldn't finish a thought without needing to pee, he said. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how it started to affect everything else. My energy, my sleep, and even intimacy. He paused when he said that last word. It was clear he hadn't spoken it aloud in a while. What Tony didn't know, and what most men his age are never told, is that these aren't just normal signs of aging to be quietly accepted. They're signals, whispers from the body, and when ignored, they become symptoms that steal more than sleep. They steal confidence. They steal manhood piece by piece. So, what exactly was happening to Tony? Let me break it down, plain and simple. As men age, particularly after the age of 60, a small gland located just below the bladder called the prostate begins to enlarge. This process is medically known as benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH. And while benign might sound harmless, its effects are anything but. When the prostate enlarges, it starts pressing against the urethra, the very tube that carries urine out of the body. Imagine stepping on a garden hose while trying to water your plants. The flow weakens, the pressure builds, and the sensation becomes misleading. That's why so many older men feel like they need to urinate constantly, even if their bladder isn't full. It's not in their head, it's in the pressure. But here's where it connects to our deeper question about masturbation. Because the same region that controls urination also plays a crucial role in sexual response. When the prostate enlarges and blood flow to the pelvic area becomes compromised, it doesn't just affect the bladder. It affects arousal, stamina, and climax. And most men never see it coming. They start noticing softer erections, longer recovery times, a sense of detachment during intimacy. And when that intimacy becomes solitary, through masturbation, many begin to wonder, Am I doing something wrong? Or worse, is this what dying as a man feels like? But let's go even deeper. Another major player in this conversation is testosterone, the primary male hormone responsible for drive, energy, and physical confidence. Testosterone levels begin to decline gradually after the age of 30, but the drop becomes more noticeable around 50 and beyond. By the time a man reaches his 60s or 70s, his levels can be up to 50% lower than they were in his youth. Now, testosterone doesn't just regulate sexual function, it impacts mood, memory, muscle tone, and even how a man perceives his own masculinity. When it falls and isn't managed or supported, it doesn't just make men tired. It can make them feel hollow. And in that hollowness, a dangerous question arises. If I don't feel like a man anymore, what's the point? Tony told me that one morning he tried going up the stairs and had to stop halfway. He was dizzy, short of breath. His legs felt heavier than usual, and his chest carried a weight he couldn't explain. I used to climb mountains, he said, shaking his head. Now I can barely climb my house. But it wasn't the stairs that broke him. It was something quieter. One night, his wife reached over to touch him, and he turned away, pretending to be asleep. I didn't want her to see how much I didn't feel like myself. And then it happened, the moment that changed everything. He stood in front of the mirror after a cold shower. He looked at himself, really looked. His belly sagged. His skin was pale. His eyes, once bright, looked defeated. And when he looked down, he saw a part of himself that once brought joy, pride, even mischief. Now still, small, almost unresponsive. He didn't say anything. He just stood there and cried. That moment, raw, honest, human, is more common than you'd think. I've heard versions of it from truck drivers in Texas, from retired teachers in Oregon, from grandfathers in Cebu. Because what they're mourning isn't just function, it's identity. But here's the truth no one tells them. This change doesn't have to mean loss. It can be a warning sign, a turning point, a chance to shift from silent suffering to understanding. And that's exactly what Tony did. The next week, he went back to the clinic. The same doctor who once handed him prescriptions without much conversation finally looked him in the eye and said, "If you don't change within 6 months, this will become permanent, chronic, and the window will close." No scare tactics, just truth. That night, Tony didn't sleep much, but he didn't cry either. Instead, he got up, opened a notebook, and wrote 3 words. Start with food. He began documenting everything he ate, the sugar in his morning coffee, the processed meats he loved, the salty snacks, the late-night beers, and most surprisingly, the thing he thought was harmless, a sweet fruit he ate every night before bed. That was the beginning, because once he started paying attention to what went in, he started noticing what came out, not just in the bathroom, but in his energy, his alertness, his mood, even his desire. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because Tony didn't just change his diet. He made a choice, a decision to stop waiting for things to return to normal and start understanding his body in a way he never had before. He chose not to be silent anymore, and in doing so, he discovered something that most men his age never get the chance to learn. Not from friends, not from magazines, and certainly not from their doctors. A way to reclaim manhood, not through pills or shame or denial, but through clarity, intention, and a few small, powerful changes. Now, what exactly were those changes? What did Tony remove first? What did he add? And what happened to his prostate, his sleep, and yes, his ability to enjoy himself, alone or with his wife? That's what I'll share in the next part of this journey. Because Tony's story doesn't end with a diagnosis. It begins with a discovery. Tony didn't change overnight. That's not how real transformation happens. But the moment he chose to stop waiting for a miracle and start listening to his body, that's when everything began to shift. He didn't join a gym. He didn't buy expensive supplements. He didn't chase magic cures. He started with his kitchen. The very next morning, instead of his usual heavy breakfast, white bread, sausages, and sugary coffee, Tony made a small change. He sliced open a pomegranate. It wasn't something exotic or trendy. just a red fruit packed with seeds. But what he didn't know, at least not yet, was that this humble fruit was quietly becoming one of the most respected natural tools for male health. Pomegranate is rich in antioxidants and compounds that naturally enhance nitric oxide, which helps dilate blood vessels, including those in the pelvic region. That means better circulation, not just for the heart, but for the prostate, the bladder, and yes, even sexual performance. After a week, he added something else. A single bowl of steamed spinach with lunch. Rich in magnesium and nitrates, spinach supports testosterone balance and helps reduce inflammation in the prostate. By week 3, Tony made his most difficult decision. He stopped masturbating at night, not because it was wrong, but because it had become a habit rooted in stress and boredom, not desire. And his body needed a reset, a pause to rebuild sensitivity, to balance hormones, to recover. He replaced that nighttime ritual with something surprisingly simple, a hot shower, followed by 5 minutes of deep breathing. Not just to relax, but to bring awareness back to his lower abdomen, his pelvic floor, the very muscles that most men neglect but hold the key to stability and sexual control. Around that time, his doctor suggested a mild herbal supplement, saw palmetto. Saw palmetto is a small plant used for centuries to support prostate health. And unlike pharmaceutical drugs, it works gently, without the side effects like erectile dysfunction or dizziness that many older men fear. Tony took a low dose, paired it with better hydration, and cut down on caffeine after 5 p.m. That last part? Hardest of all. But it helped him sleep, really sleep, for the first time in months. He didn't count calories. He didn't take testosterone injections. He didn't obsess over progress. He just paid attention. And then, something happened. One morning, about 5 weeks after he'd begun, Tony woke up and realized he hadn't gotten up to urinate during the night, not once. He lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, silent, still. Then he turned to his wife, and she was already looking at him. She didn't say anything either. She didn't have to. That night, before they turned off the lights, she reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. Now let me explain something as a doctor, but more importantly, as a man who's seen other men fight their way back from the edge. These changes Tony made, they work, not just because they're natural, but because they address the core systems at play. Pomegranate boosts nitric oxide and improves blood flow, which is essential for erectile function. Spinach and green vegetables are rich in zinc and magnesium, which directly support testosterone production and reduce prostate inflammation. Reducing late-night masturbation, especially when done out of stress or habit, allows the body to reset dopamine pathways and improve natural arousal. Saw palmetto reduces DHT, a byproduct of testosterone that causes prostate swelling in aging men. Breathing and pelvic awareness activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which not only supports better erections but reduces anxiety and improves bladder control. But here's what's more important than all the science. Tony didn't just change his diet or his habits, he reclaimed his rhythm, the rhythm of being a man, not from the past, but in the present, with a body that still feels, a heart that still longs, and a life that still matters. And that is the true cure. It's not about chasing youth. It's about learning to live in this body, this older, wiser, changing body, with grace and strength. Tony told me that one morning, about 2 months in, he stood in front of the mirror again. Same spot where he'd once cried, but this time, he stood taller. The bloating had reduced. His eyes looked rested, and when he looked down, he smiled. Not because of what he saw, but because of what he felt. He felt alive again. It wasn't about sex, he said. It was about standing there and feeling like I was back. That's the moment we all deserve, isn't it? To feel that we're still here, still worthy, still whole. And if you've come this far, watching, listening, maybe even remembering your own version of Tony's mirror, then I want to say this. You don't have to change everything today. You don't need to overhaul your life, but you can start. And you can start small. Tonight, instead of reaching for that second drink, Pour yourself a glass of water. Tomorrow morning, try adding just one fresh fruit to your breakfast, maybe a kiwi or a slice of papaya, or that same red pomegranate. Before bed, take 2 minutes, just 2, and place your hand on your belly. Breathe in slowly, feel it rise. Exhale. Do it 3 times. Let your body know you're still listening, because change doesn't begin with products or pills. It begins with attention, with small acts of care, and with the quiet courage to ask, what if I could feel like myself again? In the next part, I'll walk you through what long-term balance looks like, the daily rhythms that can keep your prostate healthy, your hormones stable, and your confidence strong well into your 70s and beyond. But for now, just know this: you're not too late, and your best days as a man, they might still be ahead. You don't need to be young again. You just need to return to yourself. That's what Tony told me 6 months after we first met. We were sitting under the same tree where he once described feeling lost in his own body, but this time he looked different, not just healthier, not just more rested. There was a stillness to him, a quiet strength that didn't demand attention but commanded respect. He had found something that many men spend their entire second half of life searching for. Not the fountain of youth, but the freedom to be a man in his own skin. And that freedom came not from fighting time, but from understanding it, from walking alongside it, from listening to what it was trying to say. Because aging isn't a punishment, it's a refinement, and masculinity doesn't fade, it evolves. For Tony, the path back to himself wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve grand declarations or painful sacrifices. It began with a pomegranate, a walk after lunch, a quiet moment before bed. And for you, maybe it begins right here, right now, with a question you've carried for years tucked behind silence and survival. Do I still matter? The answer is yes, not because of your performance, not because of what you can still do, but because you are here. You are still becoming, still capable of choosing, of changing, of feeling. Maybe it's been a while since someone said that to you. So let me be the one. You are not past your prime. You are standing at the threshold of a new one. And the most powerful thing you can do is not fight your body, but honor it, understand it, feed it, listen to it, and yes, when needed, forgive it. Because here's the truth: your sexuality was never just about sex. It was about vitality, clarity, connection, and sometimes healing. And in this stage of life, your sexuality has the potential to be something it could never be in your 20s. Grounded, peaceful, liberating. It's no longer about proving, it's about being. So if you've made it this far into the video, I want to ask you, not with pressure, not with urgency, but with deep respect. What is one small thing you can do tonight to come home to yourself? You don't need to change everything. Not today. Maybe you put your phone down 10 minutes earlier and sit with your thoughts. Maybe you pour a glass of water and drink it slowly, just to feel what your body needs. Maybe you open your fridge, pick one fresh fruit, and make that your promise to yourself. Or maybe you share this video with a friend, not because you want to teach him something, but because he might be carrying the same silent questions and has never been told he's not alone. You see, I didn't make this video for attention. I made it because I wish someone had said all this to my father. I made it because I see too many men suffer quietly when they could be healing boldly. And I made it because I believe deeply that when one man finds his way back to himself, he lights a path for others. So here's what I want to leave you with. Not advice, not motivation, just a truth you can carry. Your body is not betraying you. It's inviting you to slow down, to pay attention, to change, not because you're broken, but because you're ready. And when you're ready, the path is there, not paved in supplements or shortcuts, but in small, steady steps that remind you, you are still here. You are still powerful. You are still a man. If this story spoke to something in you, then maybe it's not just Tony's story anymore. Maybe it's yours too. And if it is, I'd love to hear from you. Not for numbers, for connection. Leave a comment. Tell me where you are in your journey, or just say, I'm here. That's more than enough. And if you know someone, a brother, a friend, a neighbor, who's been quiet lately, who's been pulling away, who hasn't been himself, share this with him, not as advice, as a gift, because sometimes the most powerful thing we can give each other is a reminder, you still matter. And the road back to strength doesn't begin in the gym, it begins in the mirror. If this story spoke to something in you, and you want to keep walking this path with us, tap the little bell, not for the algorithm, but so we don't lose each other. When the conversations that